I want to return to Larry's story of the man walking down the Ganges. The conundrum that he faced was very much like the conundrum faced by John D. Rockefeller, who started out writing checks in response to the requests made. He was responding to his own sense of conscience, his own spirituality, his own sense of social responsibility. But what he wasn't responding to is his own sense of strategy early on. He made that transition from charitable giver to strategic philanthropist. He helped to invent the field of organized philanthropy in the process, and he and his sons went on to launch entire systems of public health and to eradicate entire diseases. We're talking about results. So it's fitting that my task right now is to introduce to you, as our keynote speaker, the woman who leads the institution that bears John D. Rockefeller's name. Despite the Rockefeller Foundation's powerful legacy, including the catalyzing the Green Revolution, Judith Rodin does not believe in resting on yesterday's achievements. She feels that if Rockefeller Foundation is to be an agent of social change, a social change institution, that it too must be willing to change. And so while you have Judith Rodin's bios in your programs, I think that the best way for me to introduce her to you is to simply say, Judith Rodin is both a student of social change and an agent of social change, and she's here to share her views with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane, for that really generous introduction. We've helped, like so many of you, to support the Global Philanthropy Forum in recent years, and it's been an honor and privilege to do so. I'm delighted to be here at Google, and it's great to be in the Bay Area with its vibrant economy and leadership and technology, the new media, certainly its role as a gateway to the Pacific Rim and Asia, and importantly, its dynamic philanthropic sector represented by so many of you in the audience today. It's wonderful to be here at Googleplex, this incubator of ingenuity and innovation, and I certainly can't imagine a better setting for a conference that really aims to both inspire and to inform. I couldn't conceive of a more inspiring group of speakers and learners and collaborators in this process of really coming to know and understand the challenges of the 21st century with regard to philanthropy, because it is a remarkable time in philanthropy. Larry talked about the great privilege of the opportunity to be in this sector now, something that I think so many of us feel. But this is a moment with an abundance of change, both in terms of remarkable acts of generosity that have energized our sector and in terms of the tremendous needs in the world today. Our work has never been more challenging, and I think it has never been more necessary. But as Jane began, allow me for a few minutes to take you back in time, back to 1913, the year that John D. Rockefeller Sr. created the Rockefeller Foundation with the goal of promoting the well-being of mankind around the world. It was a milestone in the history of philanthropy, a time when industrialists like Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie were directing substantial parts of their enormous wealth towards some of the world's most difficult problems. And recall, the problems were immense. Diseases like yellow fever and hookworm and malaria were rampant, but there was little knowledge about how to treat them. Even the basics of public health were as yet unknown. Since taking on my position, I've often thought of those early philanthropists and what was happening in the world around them that spurred them into action. World War I, of course, was the Great Divide. Out of that war came terrible insights into the fragility of modern international political and economic and social systems, but thankfully also a belief in a better future possible for humanity. Looking back at those early days, what strikes me is the responsiveness of Rockefeller and his advisors to the specific challenges of his day, They saw conditions that needed to change. They did their homework. They invested heavily in world-class research. They called on experts and they paid for advice, putting many of them on the payroll. They experimented and adapted and changed course when necessary. They didn't use the word innovation then. They called it scientific philanthropy. But innovation was their game. It was bold, it was risk-taking, and it was experimental. That first phase of philanthropy, since I'm here, let's call it Philanthropy 1.0, still forms the bedrock of what we do today. Out of its approach came breakthrough achievements, such as a vaccine for yellow fever and the professionalization of the field of public health, the spread of Western medicine around the world. It was very ambitious work with a global reach, the first global philanthropy of its kind. In fact, in the early days of the foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation gave more foreign resources than the US government. It expanded the frontiers of knowledge and it improved the lives of millions. But it would take another world cataclysm, the Second World War, to launch what we can think of as the next generation of philanthropy. Again, it came at a time when faith in the progressive view of humanity was hanging in the balance. World War II shattered old colonial empires, and all over the globe, new political structures were emerging. The underdeveloped world and its problems came to the foreground in new and profound ways. Again, the Rockefeller Foundation and others adapted to the new reality. The result was Philanthropy 2.0. With much more work on the ground, the support and encouragement of the NGO sector as critical intermediaries for our philanthropy. At the Rockefeller Foundation, this included supporting entities that promoted knowledge about birth control and techniques to improve maternal and child health, and those that would lead to a revolution in agriculture in places around the world where millions were starving. We helped launch and create social justice and civil society organizations at home and around the world. This second phase of philanthropy added to the bedrock of our foundation, literally and figuratively. Philanthropy 1.0 and 2.0, each an adaptation to shifting global realities, each giving rise to new ideas, new ways of leveraging resources, and tackling some of the world's biggest problems at the time, again in new ways. Today, I would argue we find ourselves at another inflection point. Once again, the world is changing dramatically. The forces of globalization have shaken up the old arrangements. The Cold War clearly has ended, and once closed societies have now joined the cultural and economic mainstream. We look at the effects of globalization and we can see benefits everywhere. A revolution in technology, greater interconnection, more interdependence, a transformation of our systems of transportation, finance, and information. The world grows smaller, and for many millions of people, economic opportunities have expanded, but not for everyone. Some regions and groups are benefiting less than others. In some places, globalization has generated more conflicts within and between nations and exacerbated the inequities. Millions of people are still living on less than $1 a day. Some people are more vulnerable, and many more people are falling further behind, both abroad and in the United States. To address these new sets of challenges, we at the Rockefeller Foundation have been working on our version of Philanthropy 3.0. Over the past 2 years, we've been engaged in an intense and rigorous examination of our strategic direction. At a time when the philanthropic sector itself is undergoing a revolution, we've asked ourselves the following questions, among others. Of course, what are the forces of globalization, and what are they telling us, and where are they taking us with regard to our work? How can we make the most of our history and our resources to ensure that we have the greatest impact? How can we open ourselves to the great ideas and tap the wonderful new thinking that's happening in this sector? How can we listen better to our beneficiaries? An important question, I think, for all of us. And how can we be more responsive to their needs and concerns? And how can we better organize ourselves to continue to address the world's most pressing problems? This much we know as a result of this exciting work. Nearly a century after the Rockefeller Foundation was founded, our mission still has profound resonance for us. The fundamentals that John D. Rockefeller Sr. identified have not changed. A focus on the root causes of global suffering and global inequity, and a determination to address profound social issues around the world. But to fulfill this mission with 21st century tools, we are turning a new page. We have seen that innovation emerges in unpredictable ways, so we believe that the pipeline for new ideas and approaches must more deliberately be opened. And therefore, we've created new mechanisms to do so. For example, if you now click ideas on our homepage, it will take you to a new page, a new web-based structure that allow us to search the world for new ideas with regard to improving and solving issues related to poverty and vulnerability. Our new initiatives will focus on specifically defined, time-limited initiatives that address big problems, where we feel our involvement can make very high impact, where we can really make a difference. We will take on issues where we feel we can bring a distinct and comparative advantage based on our resources, our unique resources, our history, our assets, our values. Without fixed programs, and we have changed from a program-related structure to a more open architecture, we will work much more flexibly across disciplines and areas of expertise, organizing ourselves and our program work around the problem and what it will take to solve it. When fully built out, many of our initiatives will intersect and overlap in Venn-like diagram structures because these problems are knotty and they are intertwined. We're tackling problems that require us to be much more nimble, to jump in quickly when the problems are urgent and time-sensitive, as well as continuing to invest in those, when appropriate, that require a longer-term commitment. We're seeking novel and strategic forms of partnerships with a variety of players. And importantly, we're emphasizing work that enhances building capacity and resilience and produces systemic change. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. We recently formed a strategic partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation called the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. Both foundations are committed to alleviating hunger and improving agricultural productivity on the African continent by working with small-scale farmers to produce substantial capacity building and systemic change. Here we know that significant progress will only come over a long-term horizon. We know that such an investment calls for an intensely multi-layered and multi-partnered approach, requiring both small-scale pilot work and very large-scale interventions. Here, each partner is intentionally and deliberately working in a way that each does best, emphasizing its own strengths and then pooling resources, both intellectual and financial. Rockefeller has done deep pilot work on seed breeding, on soil fertility, and on output markets, creating and supporting local NGOs and large international research consortia. We bring significant presence on the ground in Africa, and prior to that, experience helping to effect a green revolution in Latin America and Asia. Gates has supported large-scale studies to enhance crop nutrients, develop new water technologies, and influence output markets. Together, we hope to bring vital energy, intellectual rigor, and resources to the drive for increased agricultural productivity on the continent. All of these, many, many elements of a continuum, including effective policy, are necessary to create an African green revolution. But we are now ready as partners to combine these areas of work and take them to scale in 13 African countries. At the same time, our goal is to align with and learn from a broader array of partners who are testing their own approaches to enhancing agricultural productivity in Africa. Our alliance hopes to bring together these partners and bring together grantees with public and private sector partners using money, expertise, and networks to help improve the lives of some of the poorest people in some of the poorest parts of the world. This model of strategic collaboration purposefully divides the commitments to seek more leverage around a single problem until the work can be taken to scale. A different example is our initiative in the city of New Orleans as it struggles to recover from the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. When the storm struck the Gulf Coast in the summer of 2005, as we all know, it exposed a horrifying degree of grinding poverty and entrenched poverty suffered by a population that had very long ago been left behind, way before the storm waters receded. At first, the Rockefeller Foundation, along with many others, gave grants for immediate help, for shelter and relief. Then months went by as city and state authorities tried to pull together a substantial coordinated plan for the city's redevelopment. But by last spring, the planning process had run into a terrible logjam, a logjam caused by a desperate shortage of public resources, a great deal of frustration and uncertainty, too many competing interests, and not enough incentive to compromise. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we saw that logjam and an impasse building that would affect thousands of poor and vulnerable people. On short notice, we jumped in to help jumpstart a unified, inclusive, and cooperative planning process, using our influence as well as our money. The funds would be instrumental in assuring that New Orleans would be able to tap into critically needed federal funds for long-term recovery that could not be released until a plan was in place. We hope that breaking bottlenecks where we can will become a signature of our new way of working. Our New Orleans initiative helped pull together players with different and competing interests, including the mayor and city council, the governor, the Louisiana Recovery Authority, and representatives of more than 70 neighborhoods throughout the city. When it was time, it provided funds for hiring new leadership to carry out the recovery plan once it was completed. And it provided funds to keep the plight of New Orleans on the national political agenda. This initiative in New Orleans was and still is a gamble. The politics are bitter, and the chances for failure are still real. But we knew that we had the resources and the convening power, and we hoped the credibility to make a difference. We hired a community development expert as a new program officer specifically for this project, and just for a few years. She was someone well-versed in the complexities of urban planning. She moved to New Orleans to help administer the grant and to shepherd the planning process. With her role complete, as it will be in only a few years, she will become the Senior Vice President for programs of the Greater New Orleans Foundation, extending our commitment to build local capacity on the ground. Importantly, all of this was planned at the beginning of the philanthropic investment. We knew from the outset that as time goes by, our ability to have impact would level off. Others would have to step in and would gladly step in, we hope, to push the process forward. And therefore, we planned carefully and transparently at the start for how our commitment in New Orleans would end. I'll take one more quick example to show you some of the array of strategies these initiatives will undertake. This is quite a different example. In the past few months, the Rockefeller Foundation launched an initiative called Innovation for Development. Many social innovators are experimenting, some with great results, and there is so much that we can learn from them. But the challenge is to create systems of innovation that work for poor people by promoting greater access to the use of innovative methods, innovation methods and tools and resources for those who are working on the needs of poor and vulnerable people. The initiative will highlight and promote testing of innovation models. Typically, these are models arising from the private sector, and apply them to our problems, fund several applications of each model to the problems of the developing world. Models that have had demonstrated success in the private sector, for example, but this is not a full list, include crowdsourcing, participatory or user-driven innovations, publicly held and freely available platform technologies or data banks, patent databases and technology landscapes that can guide innovators towards tools in the public domain and help them avoid the thickets created by proprietary rights. To take just one example, and this is an example of the crowdsourcing innovation model, we are partnering with Innocentive, a private company, It uses the web to find and reward innovators from around the globe who can develop solutions to science and technology issues. Before, issues that companies faced, we are now applying it to issues facing development that will solve problems for poor people. We support the seekers, those with the problem to be solved, to use InnoCentive's website for posting problems that need solutions, an assay to be developed, a low-cost delivery device, a low electricity using instrument, and we offer a monetary reward to the solver who provides the answer. InnoCentive's registered solvers are 150,000 science and technology experts around the world. They submit solutions, and the winning solver collects the reward if the problem is solved successfully. This is a very exciting new model, and it's one of the many that we hope to demonstrate, make available, and make applicable to the problems of the developing world. Throughout the next year, we'll be announcing other new initiatives in health, in focusing on the economic insecurity of the American worker, and on adaptation and resilience in the face of climate change. Another critical component of our Philanthropy 3.0 is measurement to assess impact. Our sector must focus some attention on issues and places not only where we know the needs are great and the problems are profound, because there are so many, but where we honestly believe that we can have measurable impact. As such, each new Rockefeller initiative is now designed with a clear time frame, identified activities and products, specified learning outcomes, and a projected endpoint. You can see in the agricultural and in the New Orleans two very different examples. In New Orleans, we expected an exponential curve. Our impact was going to be felt most at the beginning, and our ability to have impact would level off over time. So a short-term, clear initiative. In Agra, the Green Revolution in Africa, we expect a more linear set of time frames here. We will need to keep building over time to maximize the impact. So here a longer time frame, a broader time horizon, specified in each case in advance. Will we take risks? Of course. Will every important outcome be easily measured? Certainly not. We can't, of course, focus only on that which is measurable, or we will distort our philanthropy. But we must absolutely recognize that the outcomes of our investments really do matter. We have to learn what works and why, and how it works, in order to gain real leverage and build capacity in the work of this sector. That's what it will take to do really great work. So Philanthropy 3.0. For us, that means seeking innovation and influence and impact supported by the pillars of our time-honored traditions. We intend to be bold. We intend to learn and change and learn again. Just as the software designers here in Silicon Valley must retool their programs to keep up with the changing times, so must all of us adapt our philanthropic models, adapt our new ways of thinking to incorporate new technologies, to monitor and then address local and global realities as they emerge, to grasp new opportunities, to seek new opportunities. Old institutions are experimenting with new structures. The public and private sectors are coming together in experimental new forms of burgeoning numbers of public and private partnerships. We were privileged to participate in the formation of many of those in vaccine investment in searching for new vaccines for some of the most dreaded diseases in the developing world. But there are many, many other examples that you'll hear about and discuss at this meeting. Venture philanthropy, philanthropreneurs are another buzzword of the day, especially out here in the Bay Area. Whatever you call it, one thing is very clear, and Jane mentioned it already. Capital is being used more strategically, and leverage is more critical than ever. And it will be incumbent on all of us to figure out how to get that leverage from much of the work that we do. Whatever the label, whatever the structure, something radically new and something very exciting is happening within our sector. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we've chosen a new structure that's right for us. But our model assumes that there are many other forms of philanthropic giving. In fact, our model depends on that. We have come to realize that among our most valuable assets, not only our money, but the networks that we have formed on the ground throughout the world. That includes NGOs of all sorts, beneficiaries directly, experts, other foundations and partners from the world of philanthropy and government and the private sector, sharing knowledge, sharing expertise, and above all, sharing a profound sense of commitment to the importance of this work. This region has been a laboratory of new ideas and inspiration and know-how. This past fall, I met with Larry Brilliant, the visionary force you've already heard from this morning. I had the pleasure of meeting with Iqbal Peru from the Omidyar Network and Sally Osberg of the Skoll Foundation, and I look forward to getting to know and learn from so many of you over the next months and years. We're excited about trying new ways of working, and as Larry himself told the New York Times, Rockefeller is almost the country's oldest foundation, and we're almost the newest, and we've come to almost identical conclusions about the way to address the world's problems. That's very exciting for both of us, and so we have a lot to learn from one another and from many of you. I think it is really clear as we get to Philanthropy 3.0 that no single player can solve these major problems alone. This is a dynamic and complex and globalizing world, and we've got to seek solutions to these complex problems together, seeking advice from and pooling resources with other foundations, seeking local knowledge and insight from people on the ground, and partnering with experts in the public and private sectors. As you participate in this conference over the next few days, I challenge you to think about the creative new ways that you can approach your work, how you can widen your circle of partners to get the job done. The Rockefeller Foundation has been enormously reinvigorated by fresh thinking. The work has been and continues to be absolutely exhilarating. We are beginning to think about our centennial, which is just a few years away, and sometimes that kind of milestone can be a focus on the past, and often it is done so both proudly but also wistfully. But I am pleased to say that we don't see it that way. Our focus is squarely on our future. We are optimistic about the ability of Philanthropy 3.0 to reduce vulnerability, to increase resilience for millions of poor people worldwide. Working with many of you to change the world is going to be a great experience, and we will do it in important and passionate ways, because sometimes the passion has come out of the work. So let us recommit ourselves to new ways of working and new ways of thinking and new ways of partnering and a lot of mutual learning, so that we're not spending and wasting money reinventing mistakes that others have already made and that many of us could learn from. I look forward to getting to know you, as I said, and to hearing from many of you. If we don't have a chance to talk at the meeting, call me or email me. My colleague Jackie Kaur from the foundation is here, but I thank you very much for your attention. This is going to be just a sensational meeting. This is a sensational time for what we do. Thank you. Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you, Judith. Very shortly, your lunch is going to come to you, but I think we have chance to just maybe field 3 questions for Judith, and then, of course, you'll take advantage of the hallway conversations to ask her more.
Yes, in the back.
Olga Alexeyeva from the Charities A Foundation from London. Do you see a potential for Philanthropy 4.0, where philanthropy will have a global face, not just global reach?
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I know there are very few people here still who come from traditionally recipient countries and who are new philanthropists. And how would you see a Rockefeller Foundation view on philanthropy coming from East and South?
I think clearly we're going to have a very significant in vivo experience as we watch China activate itself in Africa. So we will certainly see intentional philanthropy and political aspiration come together in work in areas in which many of us have been active for quite a long time. I think Philanthropy 3.0 will continue to build out a bit as these other players from other parts of the world really get themselves into strategic philanthropy as opposed to aid and trade kinds of relationships. And that will lead to Philanthropy 4.0, what you said, the kind of global face of it. But we can't drive that global face from the West. We've got to learn from what's happening in the East and the South, and then be part of, participants in, this next phase of Philanthropy 4.0, which will also, I think, be transformed by much more, and I've said this a couple of times, but I really want to highlight it, much more being on the ground and listening to the beneficiaries. We know that the NGO community and civil society community is on the ground, but to some degree they too are intermediaries between some of the larger philanthropies and the beneficiaries. And so creating that network of sources of information, including the beneficiaries themselves, as we have found enormously helpful in the work that we're doing on the Green Revolution in Africa, where the farmers themselves are a critical part of the community of experts that are being activated as this work rolls out. Yes.
Nathan Gray, Earth Train. If the grants are the head of the hammer, how about the handle of the hammer, your investment portfolio? Does 3.0 contemplate increasing, for example, deployment of program-related investments?
I think that is the question of the day for philanthropy. We have had a very significant experiment, actually, that Jackie Core has been leading for us, using a set of funds that we put aside called Provenex to do from our program resources the kind of more expansive social investing that has been talked about. In our endowment, we continue to focus on voting proxies, on voting where we have direct access and line of sight to our investments, in some degree of negative screening, and much more importantly, in our alternative investments where we have a direct line of sight on pro-social investing. But this is an area that we are continuing to learn from others, to expand. We have a big board learning on this topic actually in June, and so many of you are ahead of us actually in thinking about this, and we have a lot to learn, and we look forward to that.
You described a lot of synergy that comes from meetings like this, where people have one idea and groups are working and other groups are working. Thank you. That helped a lot. I tried to just cup my hands, but that was much better. You talked about the synergy of getting these groups working together, and you explained a lot about the Rockefeller Foundation's efforts. I understand, too, that you've begun working in a partnership with other large foundations, I think four in New York City and one in Chicago and one on the West Coast, to examine each other's efforts and proposals to work in African universities.
That's right.
And to build this intellectual capital, that seemed to be a new mark. Is that part of the 3.0 or is that 4.0? And would you describe to us the importance of partnerships together with other foundations?
Absolutely. I can't take credit for that. That occurred before I arrived at Rockefeller, so it's the build-up to and the learning from that in part led to the new Philanthropy 3.0. But for the last 5.5 years, we've been privileged to be part of a partnership with the Ford Foundation, MacArthur, Carnegie, Mellon, Hewlett, Now Kresge just came in, and anybody who wants to join is welcome. We are trying to reanimate the African universities. Many of these were great institutions in the 60s and 70s, and many foundations and many governments made significant investments, and they were decimated in the late 70s and early 80s and 80s and early 90s. And so the effort to rebuild, to create local knowledge, local research capacity, local entrepreneurship is so critical if the African continent is to revive itself more systematically. So this is to put more feet on the ground, using as one access point the research university. It's certainly not the only one. Interestingly, and this is a kind of important recognition, we knew that it might take billions of dollars to try to rebuild the libraries, to catch them up. And so instead, we bought part of a satellite company, and we're giving them access to broadband, which of course in this audience probably isn't a great aha experience, but for some of us Eastern troglodytes, it really was. And so they have access now through the internet, and they are bringing on, the number of partner universities are partnering with a broad swath of public and private universities in each of their countries. We may leapfrog if cell phones and the like move to the new kind of technology that will be important for this continent, and those that aren't currently wired may really not suffer. But this is a very, very exciting partnership, and we are already seeing the elements of that capacity building. One sentence, because again, it's such a new way of thinking for many of us, and I, as you can see from my biography, was a university president. For many of us, we had a very proud period of educating foreign students from around the world, and we all have been the beneficiaries of having that. And so finding the right mix in this new kind of initiative where, because many of those students don't go home, so finding the right mix of continuing to be a place where foreign students are educated in the United States, but with our philanthropy thinking more intentionally about how to build local capacity in the countries in which we work is going to be a very, very important component to getting this development puzzle solved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Judith Rodin.
Thanks so much.
And let me just... I'm just going to ask Jackie Core to stand up so you know to ask her questions. Jackie, Jackie has headed up the efforts at the Rockefeller Foundation to invest and make equity investments in, among other things, pharmaceuticals that will develop diseases, will develop vaccines and treatments for the diseases of the poor. So I know that she will welcome your thoughts and your questions. Again, thank you so much, Judith, and please enjoy your lunch together.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.